Welcome to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns, Episode 2. Today I'm joined by John Warland from Liquid History. He literally wrote the book on London pubs. We'll take a tour of some of the best pubs in the city and talk about what makes London pubs so special. I've popped a link to the show notes in the episode description. There you'll find more information about some of the pubs we talked about. And feel free to give me a follow on social media at Scott Hartbeck if you'd like a little more European travel inspiration. Enjoy the second episode, guys. All right, so let's welcome in now John Warland, co-founder of the award-winning Liquid History Tours and author of Liquid History, an illustrated guide to great London pubs.
Good morning.
Yeah, thanks for joining me today, John. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, good to be here. Good to be here. We should be in the pub, but we will have a chat outside the pub anyway.
It's a little early. What time do pubs usually open in London, actually?
In London, they can open from 8 a.m. We also have the early opening pubs, such as the Market Porter and maybe the Fox and Anchor down in Smithfield Meat Markets. For those who are working 24 hours a day on the NHS or the meat markets, they get to go for, a glass of ale, maybe some champagne on the way to or from work. So those pubs are also open for the commuters. I've met commuters who work in the City of London in finance, and as they get off the train at 6 a.m, they can pop into the Market Porter, have a pint en route to work in the morning. So
is that a remnant from like shift work, you think? Like things opening up all night? Did you say that some places have a 24-hour license?
You can have a 24-hour license in London. That's unusual for a pub due to the expense of opening that long, what you pay your staff, extra security, etc. But the ones I'm talking about, they are historic local licenses to serve the night shift workers of Smithfield Meat Market. So they're bringing our meat in from all around the southeast and possibly further afield from England. And then they're working through the night, finishing as the sun rises, and then just going for a beer to celebrate, take some meat home, sleep it all off, and then go again the next morning.
Take some meat home after a few pints. We've all done it. So how did you end up with the best job in the world?
I have a background in small group experiential tourism. So I actually used to guide tours in Morocco. I also did an undergraduate degree in the City of London. So I think if you combine those two things, a huge passion for London, sharing it with small groups and like-minded individuals, I was just fascinated by London. We did all sorts of walking tours, food tours, street art tours, bike tours. But realistically, amongst all those tours, you'd always go to the pub, maybe halfway along, certainly at the end, and just chat and kind of share the good times. And that's when the penny drops that really the pubs of London, although they are great architectural benchmarks for us, they are the conduit to all the history of the great city. So since the Romans clip-clopped across London Bridge 2,000 years ago, we needed places of shelter, food, warmth, accommodation for humanity to commune, possibly around a fire, and just do business, fall in love, and just, you can talk about anything good or anything bad is often linked to a pub through history.
Yeah, and, when I'm writing about London or talking about London people, there's not enough superlatives to describe this city. I mean, you can do anything you want, everything you can think of, you can find in this city. But it can definitely, from a tourist perspective, it can definitely be exhausting. Especially if you're trying to tick off all these lists, all these things you need to see. So I'm, always telling people one, you need to go to pubs. You need to rest in between, maybe going to see the Tower of London or, going to spend a few hours in the museum. And, I would assume you would agree that the pubs in themselves should be up there on that list of sights of London.
Oh, completely. They are not unique to London, not unique to England or the rest of the United Kingdom, but the London pubs, I think there's still around 3,500. They're just great places, as you say, to take a break or define your detour. You're going to get hungry. You're going to need the bathroom by the British Museum. You're going to go to the Museum Tavern. And when you're there, you can see, Karl Marx and people like that probably had a drink in there. Dickens would have popped in there. And that's kind of as important to me an informal social history as what you'll see with the Elgin marbles or the Rosetta Stone inside the British Museum. They are not even ours. We're kind of
Well, yeah.
borrowing them informally, but the pubs are ours. I mean, Paris has its cafes, New York might have its delis and restaurants, but for London, the ability to just pop into a pub for a quick pint and a pie or fish and chips, or and just have a chat, just chat about the weather,
Yeah.
chat about the politics if you'd like, but politics best avoided. But the conversations you have in a British pub, you'll get to the heart and soul of many of the British people, because the conversations you have just the other side of the door within the confines of a pub are perfectly acceptable, and they're not equivalent to what you'd be having out on the street or in a place of work or in other social settings. There's a lovely convivial informality with a light-hearted irreverence of banter and possibly jest, where topics which are potentially divisive can be considered over jug of ale or
in
two.
my experience, so I've lived in the UK for 6 years now. Well, actually seven, coming up seven, in late April. And, I'm not going to lie, like part of the reason, one of the top things, probably, if you ask me why I love living in this country, it would be pubs. And there is that special atmosphere. Like, I've had, there's the country pub, there's the city pub. We've got, great pubs here in New York. But there is that, like you kind of touched on, that atmosphere. Like, things don't seem to ever get contentious in a pub. There is that convivial atmosphere that does seem to always override.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. You come together, and that's what a pub is. Never forget, pub is for public. It's a public space. It's not a private members club determined by class or money or creed or status. Any man, woman, child, usually a dog, can enter through the doors and enjoy it all. And it's like a washing machine tumbling away with, bankers and scaffolders and builders, and that's the beauty of it. And you will rub cheek and jowl at the bar, where the meritocracy, certainly today, there's no class divide. You can chat amongst all these sort of social demographic, and that's the beauty of it. And as you say, you can certainly broach issues in a pub that the others say on the street you're just not going to chat about. Something that's in the news, or even football, even sport. Imagine the passion involved in that. Within a pub, it can often get a little bit feisty, and that's why they divide the teams. But still, the light-hearted jest. You go to the pub to relax. You're going to have a good time, and that's the spirit in which people engage with it. And that's what makes it so special. It's not the built infrastructure of the pub, although they're usually beautiful and interesting. It's the culture. That's probably what you're talking about. After 7 years, you love going there for the culture and the feeling it gives you when you experience a great pub.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of those things you could never actually define it. It's just in the air.
It's a very simple pleasure. They might look like pretentious places. The Victorian Gym Palace are marbles and tile floors, beautiful artworks, etched glass windows and lighting. But realistically, I mean, the price of, let's say, a half pint of a nice cask bitter is probably around still £2. Yeah. So that is generally affordable to everybody on the street. So, there's no sort of pretentious security staff or doorman on profiling who's coming in. It's an all-encompassing welcome. So long as you put some money behind the bar, you're welcome to sit down and just let the good times roll. So it strips away all the social barriers. Every man, whether it's a politician, often when the visiting dignitaries visit the Prime Minister, they will always go to the pub near Chequers and have a pint of cask ale. When King Charles is on a state visit somewhere or inviting somebody, you'll see him behind the bar pulling a nice sort of pint and supping it down. And it's at the heart of almost everything we do, even if you don't do it. So there's lots of people who still don't go to the pubs and still don't drink alcohol and don't enjoy them. But I still believe that they might miss them if they weren't there.
No, I was just going to say, like, you might not have gone to a pub for a year or two, but a British person who lives here, or anyone else who lives here loves pubs, but you would still fight if that pub in your neighborhood was going to go down. You might still volunteer for that pub.
Yep, correct. You will always need it in good times and in bad times, because at some point you might need to find somewhere for the christening of a new child, or maybe arrange a wake at a funeral, or you just want to set up a local crafting club or a library that gets closed. The library in a small village might go into the pub. You're going into the pub maybe just to pick up a book, and you might have a coffee on the way out, or just be at the hub of the community. They always say the pub is the hub, and at its best, it will always serve the community and reflect the community around it to the best of its ability.
So do you actually, would you say that there's anything unique about London pubs compared to the rest of the UK?
The unique thing about London pubs is the diversity. So it's not a singular entity. It is the kind of architectural and historical smorgasbord you can enjoy. So if you imagine London, we're really here because of the river. So you start going down to the river pubs. A riverside pub is very different to a pub in the city of London. They're not actually that far away per se, but a riverside pub is generally historically going to be frequented by people working in the maritime industry. Those that are coming off the ship would have been your average workaday sailor. So that means these aren't places of beauty or opulence, certainly. They're kind of humble, low-ceilinged, wooden beamed, places which would have been warehouses and jails and probably a brothel upstairs and a real mixed bag. But it wasn't to show off. It's a completely utilitarian nature. But then you could go to a converted banking hall like the old Bank of England on Fleet Street with its chandeliers and grade 2 listed ceilings and marble edifice, and they're within a mile of each other at complete polar opposites. Or possibly somewhere like the Blackfriar, if you like your art and going to the V&A Museum. That was designed by Henry Paul, probably one of the finest artists in the world in the day, all recreated using 50 types of marble in a arts and crafts style. So it's the equivalent of going to a pub designed by David Hockney or Damien Hirst or Jeff Koons with an open checkbook. And it's that diversity of pubs which, and the stories behind them, which cannot be replicated anywhere else.
No. I'm definitely a sucker for anything with a nautical theme. I think there was one, was it possibly a pub that has a connection? There's one called the Mayflower?
Yep, that's correct. Yep, down in Rotherhithe. So called the Mayflower due to the proximity to the landing stage where the Father Pilgrims left. Is it 400 years ago? Yeah, 400 years.
Yeah,
400,
so that
400.
one, for an American visiting London might be worth seeking out, perhaps. But yeah, I remember looking that up, and it was like right on the water. It was even like a little steps you could go down and sit maybe near the water on a nice day. Or
Great pub. Go at low tide. You can sneak down onto the foreshore and do a little bit of mudlarking. So off the back of the pub, everyone will be smoking the clay pipe. So as you go to the back of the Mayflower and other pubs, there'll be hundreds of broken, often Victorian clay pipes, possibly with an insignia of the pub that would have been there in the day, maybe the Turk's Head. And you'll see the stars and stripes flying proudly off the rear terrace. And it's also allegedly one of the last places in the United Kingdom you can buy American postal stamps behind the bar, and it's a nod to the fact that might have been one of your last points of embarkation before you're hitting the east coast of North America. And you can also sign the Book of Descendants as well. So they've got a Book of Descendants. If you can prove or likely prove that you have direct lineage to those on board that ship of, I think it was 102, 103 people, then you can put your name in history too.
oh, great. Yeah, I mean, picking up a little glass pipe from centuries ago in the mud, that beats like taking a coaster home.
You have to be careful what you take home. You're not allowed to dig too much in the foreshore. And if it's really exciting, if you start finding Roman coins and such like, then you must disclose it to the Museum of London. So you have to disclose your finds, and don't take everything home. But a few clay pipes, they're so ubiquitous, not an issue.
Nobody's gonna miss one clay pipe.
No.
So what are you like what is that for you when you walk into a pub? And obviously you were talking London. I'm imagining that you've been to a good majority, but surely not all 3,000. But what are what are those signs that, like, in the first few steps that you're like, I think I've got a good one here?
I think you can sometimes even tell from the outside. It doesn't have to look like a crackerjack from the outside, but sometimes even if you put your hand on the door, you can look at the brass, often a brass handle. How polished, how well kept is that? How much love has the handle been given? Do we have any broken glass? But that's not everything. You can often, it can often conceal a real gem on the inside. But to be honest, I think it's about the welcome. As soon as you walk into a pub, it's that feeling of everything is going to be okay. The first person you make contact with is pleasant, light-hearted, wants to serve you a drink, will give you the time of day. And then, yeah, there's little defining X factors. You can't tell immediately either, I don't think. You might guess that it's a great pub from the outside you're walking in, but you might be disappointed in so many ways. So a pub, like a church, will reveal and you can unravel its fine details the more time you're looking at little nods. What's the snacks behind the bar? If you walk in and I see Scotch eggs or maybe handmade or homemade pork pies available, then I'm thinking this could be good. I don't know the quality of them, but I'm thinking if they're homemade, there was a few signatures there. If, for example,
they're putting the effort in and the love.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for love, attention to details. Are they serving beer in the correct glasses? So do you get your Timothy Taylor's landlord in a Timothy Taylor's glass, etc.? Do they often put it on beer mats? What's the snackage? Are there scampi fries?
One thing I really love about London pubs is this summertime atmosphere of how things just like spill out. Pub, they just like, I don't know where it starts or at what point in the day, but you would have more experience with this than I do. But like how you get this atmosphere of just spilling out onto the street. You're on the table, people are out on the picnic tables. Of course, these beautiful flower baskets that have been set up. Surely there's a competition between pubs on who really knows how to make those flowers look pretty and have them dangle the longest.
Yeah, one of my actual jobs is I am a judge of the Royal Windsor Horticultural Show Windsor Pubs in Bloom Awards. So sponsored by Windsor and Eton Brewery, we have a day going around looking and judging on the hanging basket, all the flora. So it's definitely a thing in the City of London. You can become a worshipful member of gardeners there through the liveried companies and be awarded there. But you're right about the spill. If you walk through Soho or maybe Watling Street, maybe after 4 or 5 o'clock on a nice sunny spring to summer's evening, you can't tell where people bought their drink. There'll be 2 or 3 pubs along the street, but there's just this buzz and melange of noise, and it's this lovely hubbub. People are getting mildly inebriated often, but it just creates this lovely warm fug as people spread across the streets of Soho and watch out for each other as well. There's not too many regulations. It's kind of look after each other, look after yourself, don't act like an idiot, don't ruin the evening for everyone, and just enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe spill is the word for that, but yeah, it's just, I'll never forget. I was in we were in London in like July, and it was a really warm day, and we were around the Seven Dials area, and I can't testament to the quality of the pubs or whatnot, but just the atmosphere of just that. It was 9 o'clock, it was still light out, and just that just buzz of people talking and just there's nothing else quite like it. I love this the spill out factor. So would you say what do you think's better, the spill out factor in the summer when you're out in the sun, or when it's cold and you go in and you sit by the fire?
I personally, if I had to choose, I would go the winter by the fire. I just think if you're out, it's January, February, little low light days, you're cold, you're wet, the utility and the sort of endorphins that walking into a pub, smelling that the fire's on before you see it, and then sitting down with your dog, maybe having a pie and a pint, maybe have a porter or a stout, and just something with some nice gravy, some sausage and mash, and just that is a beautiful thing. So although I'm not a huge fan of winter as a season, the pub provides a great reason to get outdoors, go for a walk, because that's the carrot and stick. You go through the bad weather to enjoy the pub at the end.
what is the signature drink of a London pub? Is it ale? Would you say
It is,
go in?
yeah. Historically, it would always begin with a cask ale, probably a pint. A pint of cask ale in a British pub. If you're in London, you might go for something like Fuller's London Pride, still brewed in London by the Thames, and it's an unfermented, unpasteurized, non-carbonated, smooth drink off the hand pour, which is rare outside of these fair lands. So you've got to try it. It would be like going to Dublin and not having a pint of Guinness, really. But come to London, have at least one pint of a local cask ale. So it doesn't have to be Fuller's. It could be maybe a Sandbrook's, or there's Southwark Brewery Company, something local, well kept. They, when you're pulling those casks, ask what's good behind the bar, because they only have 72 hours to serve it from when it's kind of pumped, really, because it's going through secondary fermentation, so they've got to get through 72 pints in 72 hours. So help them out with that. But once you've tried the cask ale, and it's a warm, low ABV, warm and pleasant sort of amber nectar, if that still isn't for you, then the other great drink of the city historically is, of course, gin. London dry gin is the benchmark gin that we all know and love wherever you travel around the world. So that could be as simple as a gin and tonic in a pub. Almost every pub is going to do just that straightforward one with an ice and a slice. Or possibly you could go to somewhere, if you like a dry martini, although I don't like cocktails, at the Seven Stars by the Royal Courts of Justice, Roxy Beaujolais serves what she believes to be one of the best, if not the strongest, dry martinis in the whole of London. So, yeah.
So basically, let's go with an ale first, or gin and tonic. Then you're free to go about after that. If you're into craft beer and whatnot, you're probably better off going, to a craft beer specialist bar, maybe. But there's gonna be craft beer behind the bar. But let's start with the ale if you're looking for that true, authentic experience.
Definitely start with an ale. If you're not sure, go a half pint. It's about 250 mils. Gin and tonic. Maybe go for a double spirit mixer. And then if you're looking for your keg beers, I guess you've got lots of London options, which you'll find in most London pubs. You probably find a Camden Hell's Lager. They sponsor Arsenal football team, but it's a lot of it brewed just in North London. You'll find Beavertown from North East London. Try some of their neck oil, for example. And even if you go into a historic pub and they're generally focused on the more cask ale hand pulls, often look behind the bar or ask the stuff, and they might have some craft beers in bottle or can behind the bar as well. So there's often a wide offering, and then some good wines, red, white. And I don't, there'll be something for you to enjoy.
Let's have the ale first. That's the authentic local thing to do. Now, what would you think of somebody who visited in November and walked into a pub and asked for a Pimm's?
You can try, and they would have the spirit mixer, and then they'll have the lemonade and the ginger. But of course, the best thing about Pimm's is what you put in it with your dormants, which is obviously fresh mint, some strawberries, maybe some other fruits. So they're going to be totally out of season, and it's unlikely that, almost every pub won't have those available to put in it. So
the first time I visited London, I was there on my own in November, and I had been reading for years about Pimm's and how it's the signature summer drink, and maybe I hadn't picked up that it was summer. I just thought it was like a signature drink, and I was took like a hour walk along the South Bank and crossed Tower Bridge, and meandered around, and then I was like, okay, I'm walking into a pub. This is my first time. Walked in, sat down, and said, "I'll have a Pimm's, please." And I remember getting a strange reaction. And then I ended up just with Pimm's and lemonade. I don't think I got any garnish. But, I didn't know until years later that I created a bit of a cultural faux pas there. So are there any faux pas that you would say to be aware of?
I guess a faux pas would be, don't come to the bar and ask for a glass of beer. That's often quite a common thing. International visitors just ask for a glass of beer. They don't know what size. So go half pint, pint. Order your Guinness first. If you're getting Guinness as part of your round, try and get that order going, because obviously a well poured pint of Guinness is going to be a 2 to 3 stage process, going to take a little bit of time. And then, of course, don't forget it is not table service. So even yesterday, I was in a nice pub in Richmond, and then international visitors came in, and the first thing they did, I think they were from continental Europe, they went and sat down in the corner, probably for 5 or 10 minutes. That's not a problem, but I think it slowly dawned on them that they were not going to be served, and eventually would come up.
It's not a problem, but you're not going to get a drink.
yeah, it's not ideal, put it that way. But the penny slowly drops. So come to the bar. There's a gentle etiquette over who gets served, and if someone is waiting before you, and then the bartender might come to you and look like you're going to be served, you should offer that to the person who's been waiting longer. But yeah, kind of muscle in, don't queue one behind each other. It's a long lateral bar, so find your place, make some eye contact, get ready with your order. Guinness first, cocktails if you really were in that sort of type of pub, get those in early, and then just be nice. They work hard behind the bar.
Just a quick mention of we should just have a quick mention of tipping, because that is something that always comes up. And there's a perception that people don't tip in Europe or at pubs, and I think that is a bit over exaggerated, because I think every time I've offered to one for yourself to the bartender, I mean, people are always very appreciative, and it's not crazy. So I do think people should know that tipping does happen.
I would say always appreciated, but never expected. I guess on the basis that we have gone to the bar, we're using our legwork, we're doing some of the hard yards. So maybe if you are having a meal in the pub and you're being served to the table, you are more likely to kind of tip the server. Often it might be inclusive in the bill. But then the way to do it, I think, is exactly as you said, have a drink for yourself. If you've been in the pub for 3 or 4 hours, having a lovely time, that would be the historic moment. They might not have that drink now while serving you, but historically at the end of their shift, they'd take the money from behind the bar, pour themselves a drink, and they might come and join you with the money that you've given them through the evening. So, they need, it's a relatively lowly paid sector of the hospitality industry. So I think if you want to buy them a drink, give them some tips, they are certainly not offended by it.
So you would say that maybe it's a buy them a drink or a tip per session as opposed to every round.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's not Vegas, which is, I think, when last time I was there years ago, like $1 a drink. But I would just round things up. If it's £9 for 2 drinks, just give them £10 and just leave the change, and kind of gentle, kind of 10% or drink if you've been there for a while. It's for good service. They're going to provide some entertainment for you, provide good service. And also, if you're going to be there for several hours or you want to go back the next day, then it's going to help, basically, isn't it?
No, it never hurts to know for a bartender to look across at a pub or look across the bar and see a face that they remember as a friendly one and a generous one.
Yeah,
in any culture.
No, exactly. But I think it is important also to note that if you don't wish to tip or can't tip because you don't have the cash, etc., then they're not going to look at you in a downward way at all. They're not going to chase you out of the kitchen with meat cleavers and that sort of thing. It's, as I say, always appreciated, but zero expectation. If you do, it's like, wow, great. That's that generous gift of humanity. Thank you so much.
One of the reasons I had John as well was to talk about liquid history and the tours that you offer. And obviously this looks like, for someone that wants to learn about pubs, have a drink or two, and also learn a little bit about the offbeat London, outside of just the big tourist attractions. It seems like the perfect thing.
It's a good mix. It's all about the mix. So irrespective of the pubs, the classic tour we run is just one of the best walks you can do in London, from the ancient heart of the city of London 2,000 years ago, Roman sort of London with amphitheatres under the ground and Temple of Mithras. And then you walk to the city of Westminster, 2 cities within the one London, different police forces, different mayoral sort of jurisdictions, and you're walking down Fleet Street. So it's the legal. It's the heart of legal London. It's the heart of journalistic London. And even just walking that route, you really begin to understand the history of London and how its heart beats to this day. And of course, we punctuate it with probably four classic pubs. And they're some of the finest pubs you could get in London, being either by the financial powerhouses or in the heart of legal London. So they were the great meeting pubs. So if you were a politician coming from Westminster, but you were going to say Lloyd's of London in the finance, you'd meet in the middle, somewhere around Fleet Street. Your lawyers are there, the journalists are there, and the pubs would just be the great meeting place. So some of these pubs, anyone who is anybody has had a pint at the Old Cheshire Cheese or places like that. And you can go to these places on your own, obviously, just put it into Google and other search engines obviously available, but just you can find your way to these pubs, but knitting them together within 3 to 3.5 hours with the context and all the details you can't see and that aren't immediately obvious, whilst enjoying the sights and sounds of the city, whether that's St Paul's Cathedral through to some of the Royal Courts of Justice, the Sir John Soanes Museum, chewing gum hard on the way. And it's just a great chance to hang out really with a local person. Ideally, someone like Will would be born and bred in Camden. He used to be big into the music scene up there in the 60s and 70s. If you want to hang out with someone who's seen it all through that lens, you just get to go to the pub with him for 3 hours, pick his brain, talk about his London, meet some other travellers. And although we call it a tour, it's just people going to the pub. It's an informal welcome to the city, but a great way to get off your long haul flight, hang out with a local, relax, and begin to understand a little bit more.
And surely you're going to be walking in the footsteps of some literary giants at any of these pubs, surely.
Yeah, huge. We used to start the walk down at the George Inn on Borough High Street, and that is where Shakespeare was known to perform in the courtyard of the pub before he moves to the Rose Theatre and latterly the Globe Theatre. So even on our classic tour, we can usually see where Shakespeare bought his first house in London, where the last letter addressed to Shakespeare was written. And then you begin bumping into a bit of Charles Dickens in A Tale of Two Cities or David Copperfield. You bump into Samuel Pepys, writer of the Great Diaries and recorder of things like the Great Fire, the Plague, the Cromwellian execution of King Charles I. And then there's Dr. Samuel Johnson, a writer of one of the first English language dictionaries. So, it's the beating heart of the language of which we speak around us to this day.
The Georgian, that's the one, the gallery pub.
Correct. The last remaining galleried coaching inn left in London. So historically important. It's owned by the National Trust, and then it's let back out to it's Green King at the moment, who run it as a pub. And that's the treasure for visitors and locals, is I think in any other country, a pub like the George Inn or the Blackfriar, they are so spectacularly impressive on an architectural and historic basis. They would be museums. These are museum quality pieces. So in other countries, you pay $5 just to go for a look at that. But here you pay your $5 and you just get to sit, you get to drink, you get to touch it, feel it, engage with the history if you want, or just enjoy your beer. That's the beauty.
And when we say gallery, that's an architectural note. That's the on the outside, on the exterior, there's can you stand on the galleries?
Correct. Yeah. Historically, it would have been the accommodation. So that's the difference between an inn and a pub. If a pub says an inn, like the George Inn, it was a place where you could rest your head. But that section of the building, it's almost terraced. I think like a theatre. So when you go to the Globe Theatre, which is only 400 meters away, it's as if the George Inn, which is rectilinear, it's a big square courtyard, has been pushed into the round. So when Shakespeare was performing, you get 500, 600 people into the courtyard. But if you didn't want to be down with the penny stinkers and hoi polloi, you pay a little bit more money and you were allowed up onto the terrace galleried area where you could look down, enjoy the performance, not have your pockets picked and kind of the rub. And then that architecture from the pub you see largely informs the design of theatres that we know to this day.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'm just fired up to get down there again. Is there anywhere where there's several of the most notable and pubs kind of clustered together where you can like do a little bounce.
Down in the historic brewing area, most people are going to go to Borough Market, for example. So when you're there, the Georgian is next door. You could go to a small craft beer. The Rake is down there. You have the Royal Oak. You have what else do you have? Market Porter that we mentioned earlier. If you love Bridget Jones, you can go and see the pub she lived above in the movies. So that's right there in the market. So that's what. Yeah, that's
Right.
what we know and love them. Not a Guy Ritchie movie goes past without a London pub scene.
What is the gap between the train and the platform?
No question, London is one of the best destinations in all of Europe. But since this is a Europe podcast, I wanted to ask you if you could what is your dream trip to Europe? If you could go anywhere in Europe, you could design this trip. Money's no object. 3 places in Europe besides London. Where are you going? And what are you doing when you get there?
This is a good question. And although I should probably be going somewhere beer or bar focused, like Pilsner down in the Czech Republic or something, I'm actually just going to jump on the Eurostar and I'm going to go to Bordeaux, kind of underrated city. Wine is very good, food is very good. And then I'm probably just going to hire a car and head down towards Biarritz, take the big Atlantic rollers, maybe do some surfing. And ideally, I'm going to go up and over the Pyrenees. You get a little bit of mountain scape in there before I'm dropping down to San Sebastian. I haven't been there, but I love the idea of the pinchos and the little bars and having a little beer and a glass of wine with a few snacks. And from my understanding, when we talked about the spill from maybe London pubs and Soho, that's an atmosphere on those little streets that we might get. The food and drink offering, different, but the interaction of humans with food and drink on small alleys, just enjoying, socializing. That's what I want to kind of be a part of. And I'm sure there's some fancy 3-star Michelin restaurants down there. So I might go to one of them, like Arzak, out of interest. And when I've eaten and drunk too much, I'm going to work it all off. I'm going to park the car and I'm going to begin the Camino. I'm going to walk to Santiago de Compostela and do the Camino.
This is ambitious. This is ambitious.
Yeah. This is it. This is the route. This is the route of dreams. And then I'm going to burn my hiking boots in the cliff, and then I'm either going to get the ferry back across the Bay of Biscay from Santander, or if this time and budget allows, I will slowly make my way down through Portugal, Porto, Lisbon, approaching places like Seville, and then I'm going to get the ferry across to Tangier to North Africa. I think that feeling. I love Europe, but I kind of lived and worked in Morocco, and the feeling of going to North Africa and the exotic and that final kind of moment of looking over the water to another continent would be too irresistible. So while I'm there, it would be rude not to.
So just to clarify on that, so you're taking the Eurostar to Paris, you're you're taking the train to Bordeaux.
Correct.
Okay, you're going to probably go out, do some vineyard tours.
Oysters.
Of course. Now, this Bordeaux apparently has really done a regeneration recently.
Yeah. Beautiful city. It's not too touristy. Obviously famous for food and drink. But yeah, you can do the vineyards. But the coastline from there down south to Biarritz is magnificent. About 20, 30 years ago, I was lucky enough to go interrailing around the whole of Europe for 6 or 7 months, realistically. So we saw it pre-Euro days when we just had a tent and just kind of visiting all these little places. And, it was obviously the French francs and Italian lira and drachma in Greece. So you could live like kings and queens for very little money. So I know Europe very well. So some of it would be a return and a nostalgic trip down memory lane, but hopefully in slightly finer style.
I know that feeling. Come back as we're going to do it properly this time.
Yeah, the mix again, the rough and the smooth. It's all good, So
so that Biarritz, that's down on the Bay of Biscay.
Yeah, Biarritz is a great kind of French beachside town. I'd say it's relatively upmarket. It's off the beaten track. Great surf, great beaches, but it has theatres, has casinos. I guess it's past its heyday, but It's a lovely place to hang out if you love the wild coast and French food,
Yeah.
big sand dunes. It's got a lot going for it.
But yeah, San Sebastian is a place. This is going to be a reoccurring theme on this podcast. These places that I've been wanting to get to for well over a decade, that I'm
Yeah.
constantly being bombarded with how great it is. And San Sebastian is one of these. Like, this place, when I walk in one day, as you might as well, because I'm sure you've heard these things, it's going to be like, okay, you better, this is a lot of pressure now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally got. I've never made it there. Like British Airways have just opened a direct flight from London City Airport, and it's like, ooh, long weekend, but it's too expensive. But I just even the art. I think it's got good art. I think it's got good sculpture. It's got the beaches. It's got the setting. And then I was watching. There was something on a TV about. There's a restaurant called Casa Julia, the steak restaurant, and it's not in San Sebastian. I think it's 30 minutes south, and it's just family run, cooking over open fire, the provenance of their beef, high altitude, grass fed, and it just looked magnificent. Simple bottle of red. It's not a pub, but it just has this family feeling of tradition and warmth and just brilliance. And I've just seen a few places like that. Even the mountains of the Picos de Europa look spectacular. So if I could detour there, that's where I'd be heading.
Even better. So thanks again for taking the time. And again, Liquid History, we can find you online, social media, obviously.
Yeah, give us a follow, buy the book if you want to go self-guided and hopefully define your drunken detours along the way. Or yeah, join us for an afternoon stroll through Liquid History, which is 2,000 years of history, 4 pubs, and hopefully some good times.
All right. Thanks again, John. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Scott.